You know, I just want to start this video by saying I'm incredibly proud of myself. I uploaded the video on the 11th of September about one of the most prolific crashes in Formula 1 history, and not once did I swing on that low-hanging fruit. Oscar Piastri, on the other hand, thought he'd have a go in the simulator. This level of chaos sets us up perfectly for the next race on the calendar, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, a place known for its lack of forgiveness of driver mistakes and its lack of human rights, meaning if Sergio Perez can't find form here, what exactly is the point of him anymore? We have a hell of a lot to break into this weekend, so if you end up enjoying the video, drop it a like and a sub to help the channel grow, and with that, let's get to the comedy review. There's plenty on the news front coming into this one, kicking things off with a big story leaving Monza. The FIA were concerned that Kevin Magnussen might make his own 9/11 tribute at Baku, and so gifted the day with a weekend's holiday in the form of a one-race ban. In his place would be Saudi super sub Ollie Bearman, making an early debut for the team he'll drive for next year. As with any piece of news in this sport, people weren't very happy about it, claiming the ban is now too harsh, like they weren't hating on this guy just a few months ago. If you ask me, I think people are pissed for all of the wrong reasons. This is meant to be one of the FIA's harshest sanctions, and yet everybody seems to win. Ollie gets another early shot in F1, Haas are able to get him acclimatised to the team ahead of his full debut in 2025, and Kevin Magnussen is probably sat having a wank on a beach somewhere. Maybe the FIA should just castrate F1 drivers who get too many penalty points. Yeah, that should probably keep them in line. The other, frankly even bigger story lied at Aston Martin, who finally announced the signing of Adrian Newey like the news hadn't been broken by Jeremy f***ing Clarkson of all people back in July. Despite this being the worst kept F1 secret since Sergio Perez's affair in the Monaco harbour, Red Bull were rather surprised to see Adrian Newey take a day's leave, only to pop up at a rival team's headquarters and suck off Lawrence Stroll for an hour on live television. There's not a whole lot Red Bull can really do about that. They can't exactly fire him, and quite frankly, that RB20 needs all the airbending it can get before this guy joins this channel in going green for the 2025 season. Finally in the news, Sergio Perez was given a Red Bull show run in Baku. The team clearly trying to find alternate means of getting the Mexican out of its cockpit before the end of the year. Oh, and if you haven't realised this video is fake yet, go see a doctor because you're probably brain dead. Let's get into a rather eventful FP1 then, and all eyes would be on Charles Leclerc. The Monegasque is always rapid around the streets of Azerbaijan and loves everything about this track, including the walls apparently. Carlos Sainz is less of a fan of this place, spending the majority of Friday practice desperately searching for a way to escape the confines of the circuit, be that in the runoff or the sweet release of death by Sergio Perez. The Mexican was one of the surprises of the session, in that he actually seemed to have some pace. P3 behind Verstappen and Hamilton come the end of FP1. It wasn't sunshine and rainbows for everyone, however, as Colapinto arrived in Azerbaijan to find the venue didn't even know he existed, and then went looking for the keys to the Falklands at turn 4 and brought the session to a halt yet again. Fine, have another one. Ocon was at least able to save us yet another instalment of that monstrosity as his Alpine reverted to Bahrain spec, though with just enough life to allow the Frenchman to trundle his way back to the garage. Little did we know that at this stage Esti Besti was just doing Alpine's run plan for the entire weekend. Lando Norris was keen to try out his Q1 racing lines, and I wasn't going to mention the slow Alpine originally, but history does like to repeat itself, doesn't it? He wasn't the only one struggling. His championship rival, Max Verstappen, also found out why brakes are rather important. The Dutchman struggling so much, Sergio Perez was beginning to look more than just competent. Charles Leclerc had got his annual Baku butt f***ing out of the way, but the Ferrari driver almost piled his newly repaired car into the exact same barrier come second practice, then spent the majority of the hour complaining his car was bent. And just because it's no longer Pride Month doesn't mean you can resort to that type of language, Charles. Shame on you. Once Ferrari had put its SF24 through gay conversion therapy, it managed to go to the top of the timings, narrowly ahead of Sergio Perez, who was revelling in his return to Azerbaijan, claiming his Red Bull finally felt more together again. Together isn't quite the word I'd use to describe Ollie Bearman's car when the Briton realised, as all young people eventually do, that you can't always pull out and get away with it. Just like the comment section won't let me get away with it if I don't give you another one of these. With any luck, that'll be the last of those, as drivers began to push to the limits ahead of qualifying. Williams were looking incredibly quick, as Albon and Colapinto both made it into the top 10. It would be a third different team ending the session in P1, however, as George Russell and Mercedes took home FP3 bragging rights. Now, I don't think much else happened in that session, so... When this dies, I'm going to have a f***ing party. It was now time for qualifying, but McLaren and Lando Norris were thinking much further ahead than that. The British driver has received a fair bit of stick in recent races for being the only man in the 2024 field not to have made up a place on lap 1. Part of this, though, is down to Lando's incredible consistency on a Saturday, usually starting way up the grid, or at least that's what I've been told by his fans on Twitter. Norris therefore decided it would be much easier to make up spots if he started, say, down in 17th. The McLaren driver might have been hampered by a yellow flag caused by Esteban Ocon three-wheeling it at the end of Q1. I say might have been hampered as it appeared to have gone away by the time the 4-car approached, and Woki have been conveniently quiet on the whole matter. I wonder what Papaya rules have to say when their star driver commits a multiverse collapsing f***up. Joining Norris in the drop zone would be Daniel Ricciardo. I'd love to say he was screwed by yellows as well, but instead he was just hopeless. Q2 would be less about surprises going out and more about surprises getting in. Fernando Alonso trying to prove to Aston Martin that he deserves to be there long into Adrian Newey's tenure at the team, and Franco Colapinto putting together a, let's be real, stunning lap to comfortably get himself a place in the final part of qualifying. The Argentinian was in fact so excited, he was caught climaxing over the radio. Williams were on cloud 9 then, but still had a lot of work to do in the final part of qualifying. Given this is a team who has fielded the likes of Logan Sargent and Nicholas Latifi in the last few years, this was going to be a relatively new adventure for a lot of the team. This inexperience shining through when Albon left the pits for his final run, taking with him one of the cooling fans and almost the man whose job it was to remove it. Alex's yoga sessions came in handy as he was able to remove his unwanted passenger, but the time spent doing so cost him an opportunity for a final run. We were far more interested in the leading 7 cars anyway. Ferrari led the way up to this point, but Piastri managed to split the pair by going P2 in the dying moments. The Aussie was fractions away from provisional pole sitter Leclerc, who chuckled at this false hope as he went 3/10 faster and secured yet another pole position around the streets of Baku. Perez outqualified Verstappen for the first time this century as Colapinto benefited from his teammates' misfortune to snag a best start of 9th in his fledgling Formula 1 career. All that was left to do then was disqualify Pierre Gasly and then get to Sunday. That morning would bring more changes to the qualifying order. Lewis Hamilton and Esteban Ocon watched what happened in F2 and decided it might be best to start this one from the pit lane. For everyone else, the lights went out and the Azerbaijan Grand Prix got underway. Leclerc held the lead from Piastri as Verstappen slipped past Russell for 5th, importantly without the unconsensual penetration from the sprint last year. That wasn't the case with Tsunoda and Stroll, who made contact going into turn 4, giving the Canadian a puncture and Yuki a giant gaping hole on the side of his RB, which the commentators were apparently blind to. I also love that despite this, Yuki was still faster than the pair of Saubers. We settled into a bit of a rhythm for the next 20 laps, even going through the first round of pit stops with nothing much of note besides Max Verstappen moaning about something. I'll be honest, his radio is more like white noise to me these days. All the talk pre-race had been about how Piastri would help teammate Lando Norris take the championship fight to Verstappen, but since Lando was busy pissing about with the back markers, the Papaya rules were now on the other foot. The Briton was told to show Sergio Perez his best Sergio Perez impression to help Oscar retain P2 up ahead. Leclerc looked pretty comfortable out front though, until he wasn't. Piastri firing one down the inside and snatching away the race lead. This Grand Prix was now on, with Sergio Perez closing the pair down to make it a three-way fight for victory. And that's a sentence I really didn't think I'd be saying in 2024. This raged on for pretty much the remainder of the Grand Prix, and was incredibly exciting, despite the fact not much was really going on. While we wait for the leaders to actually do something then, let's talk tyre strategy. It was pretty clear at this stage that the one-stop was the way to go. Lando Norris starting on the hards and having boxed onto the mediums, hoped to catch and pass the still complaining Verstappen by the end. Over at RB, meanwhile, they'd forgotten about Daniel Ricciardo, who was on lap 40 and still had his starting tyres bolted to his car. To f*** the strategy up that much is particularly impressive when you remember the other car isn't even running anymore. Anyway, back to the battle for the lead, and Leclerc was still piling on the pressure onto Piastri as we got into the final 10 laps. Perez, meanwhile, was still sort of in this fight, the Mexican phasing lap to lap between the driver we saw taking his string of podiums at the start of the season and the driver who couldn't get the most dominant car in F1 history out of the first part of qualifying. Carlos Sainz was now looking to get involved, and for a second it looked as if we could have a four-way fight for victory. And it was quite literally a second, as on lap 48, Leclerc's rear tyres jumped off a bridge and allowed Piastri to escape into the distance. Now it was the Ferrari on the defensive, as just a little further back, Norris was able to fly past Verstappen into turn 1 and keep this championship vaguely interesting. The new battle for P2, meanwhile, saw Perez make a move on the outside of Leclerc, the Monegasque forcing the Mexican wide, massively helping Sainz, who made his way onto the podium. Ferrari were now set to take huge points in the constructors' race, until it became clear that Charles had used up his supply of brain cells, and he pulled the exact same move on his teammate, making the Spaniard vulnerable to the Red Bull behind, who proceeded to assassinate him. Okay, this crash was more 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but the yellow neutralised the end of the Grand Prix, allowing Oscar Piastri to cruise home for his second race win, Leclerc and Russell making up the podium. It was a mega job from the Australian, and while we're on the subject of shoutouts, well done to the Williams pair for a double points finish, Ollie Behrman for slipping into the top 10 at the end, and the RB strategy team for being a bunch of f***ing While this mostly clean race is a rare sign in Baku, we still got a pretty exciting one here, and I'll more than take that. McLaren now lead the way in the Constructors' Championship, and while a few weeks ago I might have said it was done and dusted, with Ferrari on a resurgence, we could be looking at a completely different title fight on our hands. As for the drivers, Lando does edge closer to Max at the top, and if that Red Bull still drives like a hospital bed and Norris stops acting like an F3 driver, maybe we do have something on here. Let me know your thoughts on the race down in the comments below and over on the poll on my community page. Before I go, I want to say a huge thank you to the patrons who get the uncensored version of this, and if you want to get involved in that and also receive early access and previews to my content, then check out the links down in the description below. Anyway, I'll be back very soon with the final IndyCar comedy review of the year, but until then, have a good one.